Sierra took a step closer, her robe trailing against the floor. She was close enough now that Marcus could see the faint shimmer of her skin, the pulse of blood beneath alien flesh. When I came here, I wanted to see your kind lose control. I wanted proof that you were as dangerous, as untamed as they say. Her lips trembled. But instead you showed me something else. Something I do not have a word for. Marcus swallowed hard, his throat tight. He could see it now. The conflict in her eyes, the cracks in the wall of pride she wore so fiercely. She wasn't here to mock him, not anymore. She was here because she needed to see if another way of being existed, if strength could mean something, beyond domination. He shook his head slowly. Maybe we're both prisoners, he said. You of the laws your people made, me of the memories I can't escape. Her gaze flickered, her jaw tightening, but she did not deny it. Instead she whispered, Then perhaps we are not enemies, Marcus Hale. Perhaps we are mirrors. The word sent a shiver through him. He wanted to deny it, to push her away, but deep inside he knew she was right. They were both scarred, both bound by battles that had taken pieces of their souls. And here, in this quiet moment, their wounds reflected each other. Marcus took a deep breath and forced himself to look into her eyes. If you came here looking for a beast, you've wasted your time. But if you came looking for a man... His voice trailed off, heavy with everything unspoken. Her lips curved into the faintest of smiles, not the arrogant smirk from before, but something fragile, almost human. Then perhaps I found him. The words lingered between them like fragile glass. Marcus felt his chest tighten, not with rage this time, but with something he hadn't felt in years, something close to hope, but edged with fear. For a long moment they stood in silence, bound not by war but by the invisible weight of truth. And Marcus realized that this fragile connection, this understanding, was far more dangerous than any weapon either side could wield. Because if the daughter of the enemy could see humanity not as beasts, but as something more, then everything could change. And that terrified him more than any battlefield ever had. The air in Marcus's quarters felt heavier than the ship's steel walls could hold. He stood across from Sierra, his chest rising and falling with slow, measured breaths. Her robe was tied again, though loosely, and her smirk had vanished, replaced by an expression Marcus had not expected to see on the face of an enemy princess. Hesitation. For a long time, neither spoke. It was as though the silence itself was testing them, daring one to break before the other. Marcus finally moved, sitting down on the edge of his bunk, his hands clasped together to stop their trembling. He kept his eyes on the floor, unable to look at her glowing emerald gaze for fear of what it might stir in him. You didn't just come here to test me, he said at last, his voice low, steady but rough around the edges. There's something else. Tell me the truth. Sierra remained standing, her back straight, her chin lifted with that same regal pride she carried like a crown. But her voice betrayed her when she spoke. It was quieter, more vulnerable. You are right. I came here for more than a test. Marcus looked up, his eyes narrowing. Then what? She took a breath, and for a moment, it seemed even she was afraid of her own words. I came because I needed to see what could not be taught to me. My people live by laws carved in stone, laws that have no room for mercy, no place for restraint. All my life I have been told strength means to conquer, to dominate, to never bend. Her hands tightened around the robe, pulling it closer to her chest. But I began to wonder, what if that is not true? Marcus frowned, caught off guard. Why would a princess question the laws of her own throne? Her emerald eyes burned with a mixture of defiance and sorrow. Because I'm expected to sit on that throne one day. And if all I bring to my people is more conquest, more blood, then what future do we have? I have seen war. I have seen the fire it leaves behind. And though I was raised to call it victory in my heart, I could only call it ruin. Marcus's breath caught in his throat. He had never imagined that the daughter of his enemy could sound like this. Haunted, conflicted, fragile. He searched her eyes, and for the first time, He did not see a princess or a soldier. He saw a young woman carrying a burden too heavy for anyone to bear. "You came here because you wanted to believe there's another way," Marcus said quietly. "Yes." Her voice trembled, but she did not look away. "I wanted to see if humans, your kind, the ones my people fear, could prove it. Could prove that strength does not have to mean cruelty." Marcus let the words sink in. He leaned forward, resting, his elbows on his knees, staring at the floor as if the answers might be written there. "You've been told we're beasts, that we're dangerous because we feel too much, because we fight without chains." He lifted his head, his eyes sharp. "But what you don't understand is, that's exactly why we're strong. We feel it all. The rage, the grief, the desire to tear everything apart. And then, we choose not to. That choice is what makes us human." Sierra's lips parted slightly, her eyes glistening with something that looked dangerously close to tears. She turned away, her voice shaking. "If I told my people this, they would call me weak. They would strip me of honor. They would say I have been poisoned by human lies." Marcus stood, moving closer to her. "Then maybe what they call weakness is the only thing strong enough to save them." Her shoulders trembled. She looked at him then, really looked at him, as if she were seeing not the enemy soldier, not the survivor of Juno 5, but the very truth she had been searching for. The silence between them carried more weight than any weapon. It was not the silence of enemies. It was the silence of two souls who had walked through fire and found each other in the ashes. Sierra spoke again, her voice barely more than a whisper. "Do you know why I said those words when I entered? Your room, stop me if you can." Marcus shook his head. Her gaze held his, steady and unflinching now. "Because I wanted to see if humanity could hold back its own storm. Because if you could, then maybe there is hope. Not just for you. For me. For both our peoples." Marcus felt something shift deep inside him. For years, he had carried nothing but rage and grief, but now, standing here with his enemy, he felt something different, something fragile, dangerous, and yet powerful. Hope. And he realized that this was more terrifying than any battlefield. Because hope meant he had something left to lose. The hum of the warship's engines filled the silence, steady and low, like the heartbeat of something ancient. Marcus stood close to Sierra, the weight of her words still burning in his chest. Hope. He had not felt that word in years. For so long he had lived with anger, with ghosts, with a heart made heavy by loss. But now, against all reason, standing with the daughter of his enemy, the fire inside him had shifted. Sierra's emerald eyes lingered on him, steady but soft, as if searching for something only he could give. "When I return to my people," she said, her voice trembling, "I will not tell them of beasts. I will not speak of monsters. I will tell them of a human who held back his storm." Marcus exhaled slowly, his throat tight. "You think they'll believe you?" A faint smile touched her lips, but it was not the arrogant smirk she had worn when she first stormed into his room. It was something fragile, almost sorrowful. "No. They will call me weak. They will say I am unfit to lead. But maybe, truth does not need to be believed to be real. Maybe it only needs to be carried." Her words struck deep. He looked at her, not as the enemy princess, not as a test, but as someone scarred like him, someone desperate for a way forward. For a moment he wished the war didn't exist, that they were simply two souls who had found each other in the darkness. But the war did exist, and soon she would walk out that door, back to her people, back to the fire. His hands tightened at his sides. "What happens now, princess?" She hesitated, her eyes lowering for the first time. When she spoke, her voice was soft, almost breaking. "Now, I leave. I cannot stay here. But I will carry what I saw tonight. And maybe one day when the war burns too hot for either of us to bear, that memory will matter." Marcus nodded slowly, though every part of him wanted to stop her, to keep her here. to not let go of the fragile truth they had found together. But he knew he could not. She belonged to her people, just as he belonged to his. She stepped back toward the door, her robe tied now, though she held it tightly as if it were a shield. Her eyes lingered on him, and for a heartbeat, the steel walls of the ship seemed to aid. It was only the two of them, bound not by duty but by the quiet understanding of broken souls. At the doorway, she turned one last time. Her voice was soft, but it carried like a vow. When I came here, I thought I would prove humanity's danger, but instead, you proved why you must endure, because no other species could carry so much pain and still choose mercy. Marcus felt the words strike him harder than any bullet. He swallowed, forcing himself to hold her gaze. And you, Princess, you proved that even the enemy can bleed the same. Maybe that's enough for now. Her lips curved into the smallest smile, bittersweet and fleeting. Then the door slid shut behind her, the sound final, leaving Marcus alone in the silence once more. But it was not the same silence. Marcus had carried Corporal Dawson on his back through the fire, only to feel his weight go limp halfway to safety. He had held Private Lorne's hand as the younger man bled out, whispering lies about rescue ships that were never coming. He had watched his unit, the brothers who had laughed with him, shared rations with him, trusted him, fall one by one until only he remained. Survival was not a victory. It was a curse. His fists tightened at the memory, nails biting into his palms. He could almost hear their voices again, accusing, asking why he was still alive when they were not. And now she, this alien princess, this enemy, stood in his quarters, daring to bring it all back. Daring to look at him as if she understood. You know nothing about Juno 5, Marcus muttered, his voice hoarse. Sira tilted her head, her green eyes watching him carefully. I know enough. I have read the reports. I have studied the footage. That's not knowing, Marcus snapped, whirling around to face her. His eyes burned with fury. Reports don't tell you the sound a man makes when he realizes he'll never see home again. Footage doesn't carry the stench of burning flesh. You didn't live it. You didn't lose everything. For a moment, the fire in his voice filled the room. He expected her to smirk again, to twist his pain into her game. But instead, she grew still. Her expression softened, and for the first time, she looked less like a predator and more like someone listening. You're right, she admitted quietly. I did not live it, but I have lost too. Marcus blinked. He had not expected that. Sira stepped closer, her robe still on the floor, her silver skin gleaming in the dim light. When you think of my people, you see only the warriors who fought you, but you do not see the daughters who buried their fathers. You do not hear the mothers who wept for sons who never returned. War does not spare us, Marcus Hale. It does not care who wears the uniform. Her words struck him like another blow. He wanted to deny it, to hold on to the clean hatred that had kept him alive all these years. But deep down, he knew she was not lying. War never cared about sides. Pain was universal. Still, the bitterness clung to him. So what, Princess? You think comparing scars makes us the same? You think walking into my room, throwing down your robe, and tempting me to lose control will heal what's broken in me? She didn't flinch. No, I think it will show you what is still unbroken. Marcus stared at her, his anger caught, between disbelief and a strange, aching pull in his chest. The way she said it, it wasn't mockery. It was conviction. She wanted him to prove not that he was a beast, but that he wasn't. The silence between them stretched again. The hum of the ship's engines was the only sound, low and steady, like the heartbeat of something far larger than either of them. Marcus took a slow breath. His hands still trembled, but not only from rage now, from the weight of choice, from the realization that this wasn't just about her test, it was about who he wanted to be. He whispered almost to himself, You think I'm different from you, but maybe the truth is, I'm exactly like you. I bleed. I remember. I carry ghosts. The only difference is—" He paused, swallowing hard. "I still choose what those ghosts make of me." Syrah's emerald eyes widened, and the smirk was gone entirely. In its place was something he had never expected to see on the face of an enemy princess: respect. For a long time, neither of them moved them. The weight of Juno 5 lingered in the air, heavy but shared. And Marcus realized something he had never allowed himself to before. For years he had carried his pain alone, believing no one could ever understand. But now, standing in front of him, was someone who had lived a different war but carried the same burden, and that truth shook him more than any battle ever had. Marcus stood there, chest heavy, the weight of ghosts pressing down on him. Across the room, Princess Syrah still watched him, her robe forgotten on the floor like a challenge carved into steel. Her green eyes were unrelenting, searching, testing, daring. He could feel the storm inside him rising again. Anger, grief, desire, vengeance, all tangled together until he could barely tell one from the other. His hands trembled and his breath came faster, sharper. Every instinct screamed at him to act, to end this twisted test, to make her pay for daring to walk into his world. But his legs refused to move. Slowly, painfully, Marcus stepped closer. The space between them shrank until he could feel the heat radiating from her skin, alien yet alive, pulsing with the rhythm of a heartbeat. She did not step back. She did not flinch. Her gaze never wavered. It would have been so easy to give in, to let the fury take over, to reach for the vengeance that had haunted him since Juno 5. One word from her, one wrong look, and he could have crushed her defiance. He could have proved her right, that humans were beasts, dangerous because they could not be chained. His hands rose, not to strike but trembling with indecision. The air around them seemed charged, alive with an electricity that burned his skin. He reached down, and for one terrifying moment Syrah's eyes widened as, if she believed he would break, instead Marcus bent low. He picked up the fallen robe from the floor. The silence was deafening as he straightened, the fabric heavy in his hands. He could feel her eyes on him, sharp with confusion. Then slowly, deliberately, he draped the robe back over her shoulders. Her lips parted slightly, emerald eyes flickering with something new. Shock, disbelief, maybe even respect. For the first time, the smirk was gone. "You," she whispered, voice unsteady. "You could have taken me." Marcus's jaw tightened. He swallowed the fire inside him, forcing the words out through the storm. "No, because I'm not what you think." The air seemed to shift. Syrah lowered her eyes for the first time since entering, her proud stance faltering. She pulled the robe tighter around herself, as if suddenly aware of her own vulnerability. "In my world," she said softly, "strength means domination. To win is to break your enemy. To show mercy is weakness. That is the law we live by. That is what I was raised to believe." Her voice trembled, just slightly. "But you confuse me." Marcus looked at her, seeing her not as the enemy, princess, not as the arrogant challenger, but as someone trapped in chains of her own making. He thought of the soldiers he'd faced, merciless, disciplined, cold. If this was what they were taught from birth, maybe they had no choice but to become monsters. He exhaled slowly, his shoulders heavy. "Maybe that's what makes us different. We fight monsters, yes, out there." He gestured vaguely toward the endless stars beyond the ship's walls. "But in here," he pressed his hand to his chest, "we fight them too. Every damn day." Syrah looked up at him, and for a fleeting moment her eyes glistened, as if the truth of his words struck deeper than she wanted to admit. She turned away, hiding her face in the shadow of her hair. Marcus let the silence stretch. He was exhausted, drained from the battle raging inside him. But he felt lighter too, as though draping that robe over her shoulders had done more than cover her. Perseid had reminded him who he was, not a beast, not a monster. Human. and perhaps that was the strongest thing he could be. Sira stood still for a long time, her back to him, hands gripping the robe tightly. When she finally spoke, her voice was quiet, fragile, almost human. You were supposed to fail. You were supposed to prove the story's true, but instead... She hesitated, her words trembling like glass. Instead, you've made me wonder if everything I was taught about your kind is a lie. Marcus didn't answer. He didn't need to. The silence between them spoke louder than words ever could, but deep inside, he knew the struggle was far from over, because the real battle was not between human and alien. It was inside their hearts, and neither of them knew yet who would win. The room was heavy with silence, a silence that felt alive, pressing against Marcus's chest. He stood with his arms stiff at his sides, still feeling the warmth of the robe in his hands, still hearing the trembling edge in Sira's voice. For the first time since she had stormed into his quarters, she looked less like a predator and more like someone uncertain, someone who had stepped too far into the unknown. You could have taken me, she whispered again, almost as if saying the words out loud would help her believe them. But you didn't. Why? Marcus's eyes darkened and he looked away. Because I won't be the monster your people think I am. Because I've already fought too hard to hold on to what's left of myself. The princess turned toward him, her silver skin catching the dim light, her expression softer now, stripped of arrogance. She hugged the robe around her shoulders, like it was armor she no longer trusted. In my world, she said slowly, to hesitate is shame. To lose control is dishonor. Mercy is death. She paused, her voice shaking. But you do not follow these laws. You are strong in a way I cannot name. You fight the war inside yourself and you win. Marcus let out a bitter laugh, though there was no humor in it. You think this is winning? He stepped forward, his voice sharp with pain. Every day I wake up with ghosts screaming in my head. Every night I hear their names. Winning would mean forgetting, but I never do. I carry them with me, every single moment. Her green eyes softened, and for the first time she looked at him not as an enemy, not as a subject of study, but as a man broken, yet standing. Perhaps that is why you frighten us, she admitted. Because you endure what should destroy you. The silence of the human warship was like a blanket that pressed on the chest. Lieutenant Marcus Hale sat alone in his quarters, his hands moving slowly over the disassembled rifle spread across the table. The metal pieces reflected the dim light, and his fingers traced every edge as if each part carried a memory. In truth, it did. That rifle had been with him since Juno 5, the battlefield that still haunted him when the lights went out. Every time he cleaned it, ghosts returned. The smell of ash, the choking smoke, the echo of voices that would never answer again. Marcus was a man who learned to live with silence, because silence meant he was still alive. But silence shattered. Without warning, a loud crash jolted him upright. His door burst open, slamming into the wall with such force the metal groaned. His heart leapt as his hand reached instinctively for the half-assembled weapon, but before he could move, someone stepped through the doorway. A figure unlike any he expected. She moved like a storm, tall and graceful, her skin a strange silver that caught the sterile light of the ship and turned it almost soft. Her eyes glowed a deep emerald, burning with something between mischief and challenge. Marcus froze, rifle forgotten on the table, as his brain tried to understand what he was seeing. It was her, Princess Sira, the alien royal of the Cathari Dominion, the sworn enemy of humankind. The very face painted on recruitment posters, the owl, symbol of the war that had taken so much from him. Before Marcus could speak, she did something that stopped his breath entirely. With one fluid motion, she unfastened the robe around her body, and the fabric fell to the ground like water. She stood there, unarmed, unarmored, without the symbols of her people's power, completely vulnerable. And yet her eyes held no fear. Instead, she smirked. "Stop me if you can." The words cut the air like a blade. Marcus felt his chest tighten, every nerve screaming confusion. His first thought was that this was a trick, some twisted alien game. His second thought was darker, that maybe she wanted him to lose control, to prove what her people whispered, that humans were nothing more than beasts in skin, dangerous animals waiting to bite. He swallowed hard, but his mouth was dry. What the hell is this? His voice cracked with anger, though his heart was pounding for reasons he did not dare name. Sierra stepped closer, her movement slow and deliberate like a predator circling. The lights of the room caught the metallic sheen of her skin, making her seem both otherworldly and painfully real. Not a game, she said softly. A test. Your kind claims to be different. Strong, free. I want to see it with my own eyes. Marcus clenched his fists, the image of Juno 5 flashing again behind his eyes. The screams of his brothers, the fire, the sight of silver-skinned warriors cutting them down. His blood boiled, anger rising with a speed that frightened even him. She dared come into his room, dared strip away her symbols of power, dared challenge him in the most twisted way possible. I should drag you straight to the brig, he hissed, though his voice shook with the storm inside. You could try, she replied, tilting her head, her smirk sharper now, but you won't. Something twisted in his gut at her certainty. The air between them was charged, not just with hostility but with something else, something he did not want to name. His whole life since the war began had been about control. Control of his fear, control of his rage, control of the grief that clawed at him every night. And now this alien princess stood in front of him, daring him to lose it. His pulse hammered in his ears. She thought he was an animal. She thought all humans were slaves to their instincts, that mercy and restraint were lies. And part of him wanted to prove her right. To lash out, to take revenge for every friend buried on Juno 5. But another part of him, deeper and quieter, refused. He stood there, trembling with rage and grief, and realized that this moment, was not about her alone. It was about him. About whether he was truly the beast her people believed or the man he wanted to be. The silence returned, but now it was heavier. She stood tall, eyes locked on his, robe on the floor like a challenge carved into the steel. Marcus stared back, heart burning, torn between the fire of the past and the chains he refused to wear. And in that breathless standstill, the war between species became a war within himself. Marcus could still feel the echo of her words in the air. Stop me if you can. The alien princess stood there as if she owned the room, as if the ship itself could bend to her will. She had left her robe on the floor like a fallen banner, and yet she carried herself with more pride than any soldier Marcus had ever met. Her emerald eyes locked onto him, unblinking, almost daring him to break. His fists were still clenched, nails digging into his palms. Every muscle in his body screamed at him to act, to shove her out, to call security, to remind her that this was his ship, his space, but his legs refused to move. He was pinned not by fear but by the weight of something heavier, the battle raging inside him. Why are you here? He demanded, voice sharp. What do you want from me? Her lips curved into that same dangerous smirk. I told you, I want to see if the stories are true. Marcus frowned. Stories? Yes. She stepped closer, slow, deliberate, her bare feet silent on the steel floor. The stories of humans, that you are dangerous because you are not like us, that you have no chains, no order, no instinct for restraint. My people believe you live in fire, always hungry, always ready to consume. Marcus felt his jaw tighten. He had heard whispers of what the Cathari said about them. They thought humans were reckless, unpredictable, unstable, beasts wearing uniforms. Even in the war, it was the Cathari's favorite insult. You fight like animals. And you came here to what? He said bitterly. Poke the animal? See if it bites? Her smirk softened into something almost curious. I came here to see if you can control it. The words hit him harder than he expected. He almost laughed at the absurdity of it. Here she was, the daughter of the enemy's throne, a woman whose people had burned colonies, slaughtered his comrades, and she wanted to test him, as if he were some experiment in a lab. He took a step forward, closing the space between them. His heart was hammering now, every breath sharp in his chest. You think this is a game? That you can just walk into my quarters, throw your robe on the floor, and push me until I snap? You have no idea what you're playing with. For the first time, her smirk faltered, but only for a moment. Then her chin lifted in defiance. No, I know exactly what I am playing with, that's why I came to you. Marcus blinked, his anger shifting into confusion. Why me? Her voice softened, though her eyes still held that burning intensity. Because you survived Juno 5. The name froze him in place. The ghosts came rushing back, the battlefield, the flames, the screams. She knew. Somehow she knew. I studied you, she continued, her tone quieter now, almost reverent. A soldier who fought until the last, who carried the broken from the fire, who lived when none of his brothers did. To my people, you are proof of what humans are. Relentless, uncontrollable, impossible to chain. I wanted to see it with my own eyes. I wanted to feel it. Her words cut deeper than any blade. Marcus felt raw, exposed, as if she had torn open wounds he had spent years trying to close. He wanted to shout at her, to tell her she didn't understand, that survival wasn't glory. It was pain. But the words stuck in his throat. Instead, he forced a whisper. You think survival makes me dangerous? No, she said, and for the first time there was no smirk, no mockery, only honesty. It makes you human, and that terrifies us. Marcus's chest rose and fell in heavy breaths. He wanted to hate her, to throw her out, to end this twisted game. But something in her voice, soft, trembling beneath the pride, pulled at him. She wasn't just here to test him. She was searching for something. The room felt smaller now, the air thick with unspoken words. Marcus's instincts screamed for action, but his heart warned him to wait, to listen. You should leave, he said finally, though his voice lacked the strength he wished it had. Syrah tilted her head, studying him as though his refusal only deepened her interest. Maybe I should, she murmured, but not yet, not until I know. She stepped back, giving him space, but her eyes never left his. The robe still lay on the floor between them, like a line neither of them dared to cross. Marcus realized then that this was no simple encounter. This was the beginning of something neither of them understood. A test, a challenge, and perhaps a battle greater than any fought with guns. And for the first time, Marcus feared not for his life, but for what he might discover about himself. Marcus stood frozen, staring at the alien princess as her words hung in the air. Juno 5. The name was a knife twisting inside him. He hated how easily she had spoken it, as if it were only a fact in a report, not the scar carved into his very soul. And turned away from her, trying to hide the storm building in his chest. But the memories came anyway, uninvited and merciless. The battlefield had been hell. The skies burned orange with fire, the ground blackened with ash. He could still smell it, the stench of smoke, blood, and metal. He could still hear the cries of the dying, the desperate calls for medics who never came, the explosions that shook the earth until even the strongest men trembled.